The great station called Harmony's Edge floated in the dark space between stars. It was bigger than most cities, made of gleaming metal and crystal that caught the light from distant suns. Inside its halls, representatives from dozens of alien species gathered for an emergency meeting. The air was thick with fear. Ambassador Taeho Kim walked slowly through the corridors, his black diplomatic uniform neat and clean. Other aliens moved past him, tall blue creatures with 4 arms, small furry beings that chirped as they talked, and others too strange to describe. They all looked worried, very worried. Taeho was one of only 3 humans on the massive station. His people had joined the Galactic Council just 20 years ago, when Earth finally built ships that could travel between stars. Most of the other species had been spacefaring for thousands of years. To them, humans were still children playing, with toys. The main meeting hall was huge, with seats arranged in circles around a central stage. Hundreds of delegates sat in their assigned spots talking in low voices. The air hummed with translation devices turning alien words into languages everyone could understand. "The session will now begin," announced a mechanical voice from hidden speakers. High Counselor Vextar took the stage. She was from the Kalani, a species that looked like walking fish with smooth, wet skin that changed colors. Right now, her skin was flashing deep red, a sign of extreme distress among her people. "My friends," Vextar began, her voice shaking, "we face the darkest hour in our galaxy's history. The Vorthak Empire has begun what they call the Great Harvest." A large screen appeared above the stage, showing star maps with red zones spreading like blood across the galaxy. Taeho leaned forward in his seat. His aide, Yuna Park, sat beside him taking notes on her tablet. 3 star systems have already fallen, Vextar continued. The Chirathi homeworld is gone. Their people are slaves now, forced to work in Vorthak mining colonies. The Nethrim gas clouds have been drained completely. Billions of lives lost in just 2 months. The hall was completely silent now. Even the translation devices seemed to whisper. Another alien stood up, Counselor Thrak from the insect-like Chirathi. What was left of his people anyway? His 4 wings were torn, and one of his 6 arms hung uselessly at his side. "We sent 12 fleets to stop them," he said, his voice like grinding metal. "The Vorthak destroyed all 12 in one day. Their bioships are unlike anything we've seen. They eat our weapons and grow stronger." Vextar's skin flashed even redder. "My own world, Kelanos, is under attack as we speak. Our crystalline cities are breaking like glass. Our children hide in the deep ocean trenches, but even there, the Vorthak hunting machines find them." She touched a control, and the screen showed images that made many delegates look away. Beautiful crystal spires lay in ruins. Bodies floated in alien seas. Ships the size of mountains moved through space, their hulls covered in what looked like living tissue that pulsed with dark energy. "We have perhaps 6 days before Kalanos falls completely," Vextar said. "After that, the Vorthak will move to the next system, then the next. They will not stop until every free world in the galaxy belongs to them." An old delegate from the bird-like Skyros species stood up. "What do you want us to do? We've seen what happens when we fight them directly. They're too strong." "There must be something," said another voice. "Some weakness we haven't found." Vextar looked around the hall, her large eyes wet with tears that fell like small pearls. "We've tried everything. Our best scientists, our greatest military minds, our most advanced weapons, nothing works. The Vorthak technology is beyond our understanding." "Then we run," said a delegate from the back. "We take our people and flee to the outer rim." "And then what?" Vextar asked. "Hide forever while the Vorthak consume world after world? They'll find us eventually, they always do." The hall erupted in arguments. Some species wanted to fight. Others wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. A few suggested fleeing to distant galaxies. But everyone knew the truth. They were trapped. In the middle of all the shouting, Taeho Kim stood up. The noise didn't stop at first. Most aliens didn't even notice the human representative. But slowly, a few others saw him standing there, calm and patient. The arguments died down until the hall was quiet again. The humans wish to speak, announced the mechanical voice. All eyes turned to Tae-ho. He looked small compared to many of the other delegates, but there was something in his expression that made others pay attention. High Counselor Vextar, Tae-ho said in his quiet voice. What exactly are you asking of us? Vextar looked surprised by the question. We need help. Military support, ships, weapons, anything you can spare. A few delegates made sounds that might have been laughter if they weren't so bitter. The Zentari ambassador, a creature that looked like a walking tree, shook his branches. The humans have what, 50 ships? 100? What good would that do against 10,000 Vorthak vessels? Tae-ho ignored the comment. His aide Yuna whispered something to him, but he just nodded slightly. High Counselor, you're asking us to help you fight an enemy that has destroyed every fleet sent against it. You're asking us to risk our people's lives for worlds we've never seen, for species we barely know. Vextar's skin went pale. Yes, I am. Because if we fall, you'll be next. The Vorthak won't stop with the older worlds. They'll come for Earth too. That's probably true. Tae-ho agreed. The calmness in his voice made several delegates shift, uncomfortably in their seats. The Skyros delegate spread his wings wide. Then you understand. Either we all stand together or we all fall separately. Tae-ho was quiet for a long moment. Around the hall, hundreds of alien faces watched him. Some looked hopeful. Others looked resigned to disappointment. The humans were new, weak, unimportant. What could they possibly offer? Finally, Tae-ho nodded slowly. High Counselor Vextar, members of the Galactic Council, humanity has heard your call for help. He paused, looking around the massive hall. When he spoke again, his voice carried clearly to every corner. We'll send what we can. The reaction was immediate but muted. A few delegates nodded politely. Others looked disappointed but not surprised. The Zentari ambassador actually sighed, his leaves rustling sadly. Thank you, Vextar said, though her skin remained pale. Every ship will help. Every life saved will matter. Tae-ho sat down as the meeting continued. Other species began making their own promises. The Altrani would send medical supplies. The Korath had some old warships they could spare. The Nexus Collective offered their best computer programs to help coordinate defenses, but everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. The older species had been fighting space wars for millennia. If they couldn't stop the Vorthak, what hope did anyone have? As the meeting ended and delegates began filing out, Yuna leaned over to Tae-ho. Sir, what exactly did you mean by what we can? The Defense Ministry said we could spare maybe 20 ships without leaving Earth defenseless. Tae-ho smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. It was the kind of smile a person makes when they know something others don't. I didn't talk to the Defense Ministry, Yuna. Then who did you talk to? Everyone, Tae-ho said quietly. I talked to everyone. Before Yuna could ask what that meant, Tae-ho's communication device chimed. He looked at the message, and his smile grew wider. What is it, sir? Tae-ho showed her the screen. It was a simple message from Earth. Armada mobilization authorized. First fleet launches in 60 hours. Yuna stared at the message. First fleet? How many fleets are there? Tae-ho stood up and straightened his uniform. Around them, alien. Delegates continued their worried conversations, already planning their retreats and surrenders. That, Tae-ho said, is going to be a very interesting surprise. 3 days after the emergency meeting, deep space monitoring stations across the galaxy began picking up strange readings. The sensors belonged to different alien species, scattered across hundreds of star systems, but they all detected the same thing, massive energy signatures coming from human space. Dr. Kethmore was working the night shift at the Zentari Deep Space Observatory when the first readings appeared on his screens. His tree-like fingers moved across the controls as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. This can't be right, he muttered to himself, his leaves rustling with confusion. The energy readings showed huge objects moving through hyperspace, objects bigger than anything in his databases. He called his supervisor. Then his supervisor called her supervisor. Within an hour, the readings were being examined by the best scientists in Zentari space. The same thing was happening everywhere. On the crystal monitoring stations of the fallen Kalani worlds, automated systems recorded massive hyperspace disturbances. Chirathi sensor networks detected energy patterns unlike anything they had seen before. Even the mysterious Nexus Collective, with their advanced computer systems, struggled to understand what was happening in human space. Meanwhile, in the shipyards orbiting Earth, Admiral Dongwu Li stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the largest military buildup in human history. The Soul's Thunder was a sight to behold. At just over 1 kilometer long, it was the biggest warship humanity had ever built. Its hull was covered in layers of reactive armor that could absorb and redirect energy weapons. Along its sides, railgun batteries waited in armored turrets, each cannon capable of throwing projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. But the Soul's Thunder was just one ship among hundreds. Captain Subin Choi commanded the battle, Cruiser Busan's Revenge, a ship designed to punch through enemy lines with its heavy plasma cannons. General Haewon Kang watched from the bridge of the carrier ship Jeju's Pride as thousands of fighters launched from its bays. Each fighter was piloted by humans whose reflexes had been sharpened by decades of competitive gaming and virtual reality training. "Admiral," reported Commander Jin Woo-yoon from his position at the tactical station. "All ships report ready for hyperspace jump. The fleet is assembled." Admiral Lee nodded slowly. Through the viewports, he could see the other ships. Of the first human armada, battle cruisers and destroyers formed neat lines. Carrier ships launched and recovered fighters in practice runs. Support vessels, medical ships, supply ships, mobile repair yards, waited in the rear formations. But what made this fleet truly impressive wasn't just the military vessels. Mixed in with the warships were converted civilian ships. Mining vessels now carried military-grade shields and sensor arrays. Cargo haulers had been fitted with drone launch bays. Even luxury passenger liners had been turned into mobile hospitals and troop transports. Every human colony had contributed something. Mars shipyards had built the heavy cruisers. The asteroid belt mining stations provided the converted industrial ships. The outer system research colonies sent their best scientists and engineers. Even Earth's moon colonies had emptied their defense forces to join the Armada. "Sir," said another officer, "we're getting a communication from Admiral Park on the Second Armada. They're ready to follow us once we establish the initial staging area." Admiral Lee raised an eyebrow. "Second Armada?" "Yes, sir. Admiral Park reports 12 battle groups ready for deployment, and Admiral Kim's Third Armada will be ready within the week." Captain Choi, listening from her own ship, spoke up on the communication channel. "Admiral, how many fleets did High Command authorize?" Admiral Lee was quiet for a moment. The truth was High Command hadn't needed to authorize anything. When Ambassador Kim's message reached Earth, something unprecedented had happened. Every human military force, from Earth's global defense fleet to the smallest colony patrol ship, had volunteered. Corporate security fleets joined the effort. Private ship owners offered their vessels. Even retired military officers came out of retirement to serve. "As many as it takes, Captain," Lee finally answered. The preparation hadn't just been about gathering ships. For 3 days, human military strategists had been studying every piece of data about the Vorthak Empire. They analyzed battle recordings from the destroyed Chirathi fleets. They examined wreckage from Kalani defense forces. They interviewed every refugee who had escaped the Vorthak attacks. What they discovered was that every species in the galaxy fought the same way, ship against ship in open space, like naval battles from ancient Earth history. The Vorthak were very good at this type of fighting. Their biomechanical ships could absorb damage and grow stronger. Their tactics were based on overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority. But humans had learned warfare differently. They had fought on planets and in space, in jungles and cities, on land and sea and air. Human military doctrine was based on one simple idea: use every advantage, exploit every weakness, and never fight fair if you can help it. All ships, Admiral Lee announced. This is Admiral Lee. Today we begin Operation Guardian Angel. Our mission is simple. Stop the Vorthak Empire from destroying any more worlds. Our orders are even simpler. Whatever it takes. He paused, looking out at the assembled fleet. Thousands of ships. Millions of human beings who had volunteered to fight for aliens they had never met, to protect worlds they had never seen. The galaxy sees us as the young species, the newcomers. They think we're weak because we're new to space. They're about to learn how wrong they are. The hyperspace jump was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. When a normal fleet jumped to hyperspace, it created a brief energy spike that sensors could detect. When the first human armada jumped, every sensor in 3 star systems overloaded from the massive energy discharge. On Harmony's Edge station, Ambassador Tae-ho Kim was meeting with other diplomats when the reports started coming in. Yuna, Park burst into the meeting room, her tablet showing readings from across the galaxy. "Sir," she said, trying to catch her breath. "You need to see this." The other diplomats, a Zentari, 2 Skyros, and a Nexus Collective representative, gathered around as Yuna displayed the sensor readings. "These energy signatures," the Zentari ambassador said, his leaves trembling. "They're showing hundreds of large objects in hyperspace, moving toward Vorthak territory." "Thousands," corrected the Nexus Collective representative, its metallic voice emotionless. "Our calculations indicate approximately 3,000 individual vessels." The Skyros delegates looked at each other with their large, bird-like eyes. "That's impossible. Humans don't have 3,000 warships." Tae-ho smiled. "You're right. We don't have 3,000 warships." "Then what are those readings?" "Those," Tae-ho said, "are 3,000 ships of all kinds. Warships, cargo ships, mining vessels, research ships, passenger liners, private yachts, and anything else that can carry weapons and life support. When you asked for help, the response wasn't just from our military. It was from our entire civilization." Before anyone could respond, Yun-Ah's tablet chimed with another message. She read it quickly, then looked up with wide eyes. "Sir, this is from Admiral Lee. The first Armada has arrived at the staging area. They're requesting coordinates for the next phase of operations." "First Armada?" asked the Zentari ambassador. "How many armadas do humans have?" Tae-ho looked out through the station's viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were racing toward battles that would decide the fate of the galaxy. His people had been underestimated for too long. Right now, 15 are either deployed or deploying, with more being organized every hour. The alien diplomats stared at him in shock. The Skyros ambassador's feathers ruffled with agitation. 15 armadas. That would be tens of thousands of ships. "More than that," Tae-ho said quietly. "Much more than that." He activated his communication device and sent a message to Admiral Lee. The message was simple. "Vorthak main fleet detected in the Crimson Nebula. All civilian populations evacuated from surrounding systems. You are clear to engage." As he sent the message, Tae-ho thought about the conversation 3 days ago. How the other species had looked at him with pity when he said humans would send what we can. They had expected a few dozen ships and a polite gesture. Instead, humanity was sending the largest military force in galactic history, not for conquest or territory, but for one simple reason: because someone had asked for help. The galaxy was about to discover what humans meant when they made a promise. The first human armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Vorthak territory like a storm appearing from clear skies. Admiral Lee watched from the Bridge of Souls Thunder as 3,000 ships materialized in perfect formation around him. "Tactical report," he ordered. Commander Wu Jin-nam stepped forward, his face serious. "Sir, we have multiple Vorthak patrol groups in this sector. Initial scans show 37 enemy vessels in the immediate area. Standard Vorthak formation. Bioships arranged in hunting packs." Admiral Lee nodded. The Vorthak had been using the same tactics for centuries. Their ships were living creatures grown in vast biofactories with hulls that could heal damage, and weapons that fed on the energy of destroyed enemies. Every other species had tried to fight them ship to ship, beam to beam. Every other species had lost. But humans had spent their 3 days of preparation doing something different. They had studied. Dr. Mi-Young Shin, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, pulled up her research on the main screen. Admiral, we've analyzed wreckage from 17 different battles against the Vorthak. Their bioships have some impressive abilities, but they also have weaknesses that no one has exploited. Such as? Asked Captain Subin Choi from her battle cruiser. They're alive, Dr. Shin said simply. Living things need certain conditions to survive. They need the right temperature, the right chemicals, the right environment. Change those conditions quickly enough, and even the toughest creature will struggle. Tactician Jin Suk-yu, one of the fleet's strategic planning officers, brought up a detailed battle plan. We've identified several attack patterns that no species has tried before. The Vorthak expect ship-to-ship combat. They're not prepared for what we're bringing. On the edge of the system, a Vorthak patrol group had detected the massive human fleet. The alien ships moved forward, confident in their superiority. They had crushed every enemy fleet they had encountered. These new ships would be no different. Admiral Lee watched the approaching enemy vessels through his tactical display. The Vorthak ships were ugly things, twisted combinations of organic tissue and mechanical parts. They moved through space like swimming creatures, their hulls pulsing with dark energy. All ships, Lee announced. Execute Plan Ghost. What happened next was unlike any space battle in galactic history. Instead of charging forward to meet the enemy, the human fleet seemed to disappear. Stealth ships that had been developed from Earth's submarine technology activated cloaking devices. The main battle fleet spread out into small groups using the asteroids and debris in the system to hide their positions. The Vorthak patrol group found themselves alone in empty space, their biosensors searching for targets that were no longer there. First wave, execute, ordered Admiral Lee. From hidden positions throughout the system, human fighters launched. But these weren't normal fighters engaging in dogfights. These were precision strike craft carrying specialized weapons that Dr. Shin's team had designed specifically for bioships. The fighters didn't try to destroy the Vorthak vessels. Instead, they released clouds of engineered viruses and chemical compounds designed to disrupt organic systems. The Vorthak bioships began to convulse as their living hulls were attacked by microscopic enemies they had never encountered. Second wave, execute. Now the human destroyers revealed themselves, but not where the Vorthak expected. They appeared behind the enemy ships, having used the asteroid field for cover. Their weapons weren't trying to punch through heavy armor. They were targeting the bioship's nervous systems with precisely tuned energy pulses. The Vorthak ships began to behave erratically. Some fired at empty space. Others spun in circles as their organic control systems failed. Third wave, execute. The human Marines launched their assault. But instead of trying to board heavily defended enemy ships, they targeted the bioships, equivalent of vital organs. Small teams of Marines in specialized armor cut through weakened hull sections and planted charges inside the ship's biological systems. The entire battle lasted 12 minutes. When it was over, 37 Vorthak ships had been either destroyed or captured without the loss of a single human vessel. More importantly, several bioships had been taken intact, providing valuable intelligence about Vorthak technology. Commander Nam reviewed the battle reports with amazement. Sir, the tactics worked better than we hoped. The Vorthak don't know how to respond to coordinated attacks on their biological systems. Admiral Lee was already thinking about the next phase. What's our intelligence on the main Vorthak fleet? Dr. Shin pulled up new data. Based on our captured ships, we've learned more about their command structure. The Vorthak use a hierarchical system with War Premier Kethvar commanding from a flagship called Death's Harvest. It's a massive bioship the size of a small moon. How many ships total? Approximately 10,000 vessels, sir. They're massed in the Crimson Nebula, using it as a staging area for attacks on the remaining free worlds. Captain Choi's voice came through the communication system from her cruiser. Sir, 10,000 ships is a lot, even for us. Are we really going to attack them directly? Admiral Lee looked around the bridge at his officers. These were good people, smart, dedicated, brave. They had volunteered to fight for aliens they didn't know, in a war that wasn't originally theirs. Captain, the Galactic Council thinks we sent them a small support fleet. They have no idea what we're really capable of. The Vorthak think they're facing another traditional enemy. They're about to learn how wrong they are. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Lee. Phase 1 is complete. We've proven that Vorthak bioships can be defeated. Now we move to Phase 2. Throughout the human fleet, ship captains and crew members listened carefully. They knew what Phase 2 meant. The real battle was about to begin. We're going to do something that no species in galactic history has attempted, Lee continued. We're going to attack the main Vorthak fleet directly, not to destroy it, to capture it. We're going to end this war not just by defeating the enemy, but by turning their own weapons against them. The plan was audacious beyond belief. Instead of the traditional approach of matching fleet against fleet, the humans intended to use everything they had learned about biological warfare, stealth tactics, and coordinated assault to take control of the enemy's most powerful ships. Sir, said Commander Nam quietly, there's one more thing. We've been monitoring communications from the other armadas. The second and third human armadas have reached their staging positions. Admiral Park and Admiral Kim are requesting orders. Admiral Lee smiled. The Vorthak were about to face not just one human fleet, but multiple armadas attacking from different directions using tactics they had never seen before. Tell them to proceed with the plan. Full coordination protocol. As the first armada began, moving toward the Crimson Nebula, similar scenes were playing out across Vorthak space. Human fleets were appearing everywhere, using new tactics that turned the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. The galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. A species that had been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries was about to challenge an empire that had terrorized the stars for millennia, and they were going to win. The Crimson Nebula was beautiful and deadly. Clouds of red gas stretched across millions of kilometers, hiding massive objects within their glowing depths. It was here that War Premier Kethvar had gathered the full might of the Vorthak Empire. 10,000 bioships arranged in perfect formations ready to complete the Great Harvest. From the bridge of his flagship Death's Harvest, Kethvar watched the sensor readings with cold satisfaction. The massive ship around him pulsed with living tissue, its organic walls breathing slowly. At 3 kilometers long and shaped like a predatory sea creature, Death's Harvest was more than a warship. It was a living nightmare capable of destroying entire planets. War Premier, reported his tactical officer, a smaller Vorthak with cybernetic implants covering half his face. Our forward scouts report the approach of an unknown fleet. The ships match no known configuration in our databases. Kethvar's scaled lips curled into what might have been a smile. More prey comes to us. How many ships? Approximately 3,000. War Premier. They appear to be from the species called humans. The War Premier had heard of humans. A young race barely able to travel between stars. Their inclusion in the Galactic Council was considered a joke by most established powers. What could such primitive creatures possibly do against the might of the Vorthak Empire? 3,000 ships, Kethvar mused. More than usual for such a weak species. Perhaps they hope numbers will make up for their inferior technology. He gave the order that had sealed the fate of countless civilizations. All ships attack formation. We will crush these newcomers quickly and move on to more important targets. The Vorthak fleet began to move. 10,000 bioships emerged from the nebula like a swarm of cosmic predators. Their hulls gleamed with organic armor. Their weapons, living cannons that fired concentrated energy beams, charged with deadly light. Admiral Lee watched the approaching enemy fleet from the bridge of Soul's Thunder. Around him, his officers monitored their stations with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment, planned for every possible scenario. Sir, reported Commander Nam. Vorthak main fleet is approaching in standard attack formation. They're not using any special tactics, just overwhelming force. Perfect, Lee replied. They're doing exactly what we expected. Captain Choi's voice came through the communication system. Admiral, my sensors show some of those bioships are massive. That flagship must be the size of a space station. It is, confirmed Dr. Shin from her science station. Death's Harvest is the largest living ship ever created. It's essentially a mobile planet killer. Flight leader Dayun Lim, commanding a squadron of fighters from the carrier Inchin's Pride, checked her weapon systems. Sir, my pilots are ready. We've trained specifically for fighting bioships. Admiral Lee looked out at the approaching enemy fleet. To most observers, it would seem hopeless. 3,000 human ships against 10,000 Vorthak vessels. But Lee knew something the enemy didn't. This wasn't just 3,000 ships. This was 3,000 ships working together as parts of a single massive organism. All ships, he announced, execute Plan Dragon. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries to come. Instead of meeting the Vorthak, charge head-on, the human fleet suddenly scattered in all directions. Ships broke formation and seemed to flee in random patterns. To the Vorthak, it looked like their enemies had panicked at the sight of the massive enemy force. Kethavar watched, with satisfaction as the human ships appeared to run in terror. Pursue them, he ordered. Don't let any escape. We will make an example of this pathetic species. The Vorthak fleet spread out to chase the fleeing humans, breaking their tight formation to catch ships that seemed to be escaping in all directions. It was exactly what the humans wanted. Phase 2, execute, ordered Admiral Lee. Suddenly, the human ships that had seemed to be fleeing stopped running. They turned around and revealed their true purpose. They had positioned themselves throughout the nebula, surrounding the now scattered Vorthak fleet. But more than that, sensors throughout the nebula began detecting new contacts. Massive energy, signatures approaching from 12 different directions. The second human armada dropped out of hyperspace on the Vorthak fleet's left flank. 3,000 more ships, led by Admiral Park on the battlecruiser Gwangju's Hammer. The third armada appeared on the right, commanded by Admiral Kim from the carrier Daegu's Wing. Then came the fourth armada, and the fifth, and the sixth. Within minutes, the Crimson Nebula was filled with human ships. 12 full armadas, each one as large as the first. More than 36,000 human vessels surrounded the Vorthak fleet from every possible angle. War Premier Kethavar stared at his tactical displays in shock. "This is impossible," he growled. "The humans don't have this many ships. No one has this many ships." His tactical officer's voice shook with fear. "War Premier, we're detecting energy signatures consistent with major fleet actions. The humans appear to have mobilized their entire civilization." They had. Every human world, every colony, every corporate fleet, every private ship owner, all had contributed to what was now the largest military force in galactic history. But size alone wasn't their greatest advantage. All fleets, coordinate targeting, ordered Admiral Lee. This was where human tactics truly showed their superiority. Each ship in the massive fleet wasn't operating independently. They were all connected through advanced communication networks, sharing sensor data and coordinating attacks in real time. Every human pilot, every gunner, every tactical officer was working as part of a single vast intelligence. The attack began. Human fighters swarmed through the nebula like schools of metallic fish. Each squadron had trained extensively in anti-bioship tactics. They released clouds of engineered viruses that attacked the living hulls of enemy vessels. They fired precision strikes at biological nerve centers. They worked in perfect coordination, each pilot knowing exactly where every other pilot was and what they were doing. The capital ships followed with devastating effect. Human railguns fired projectiles designed to disrupt organic systems, energy weapons tuned to specific frequencies that caused bioship nervous systems to overload, chemical weapons that poisoned the living components of enemy hulls. But the most impressive part was the coordination. When one human ship found a weakness in an enemy vessel, that information was instantly shared with every other ship in the fleet. When a bioship adapted to one type of attack, human vessels switched to different tactics seamlessly. The Vorthak fought back with desperate fury. Their bioships fired massive energy beams that could vaporize smaller vessels. Death's Harvest itself unleashed weapons that could destroy entire formations of ships. But for every human ship they destroyed, 10 more appeared to take its place. and the humans learned from every loss, adapting their tactics in real time. Commander Jae-sung Park, controlling drone swarms from the carrier Pohang's shield, watched his tactical display with amazement. "Sir, the enemy is starting to fall back toward their flagship. They're trying to regroup." "Let them," Admiral Lee replied. Phase 3, execute. Now came the most audacious part of the human plan. Instead of simply destroying the enemy fleet, they began capturing bioships intact. Marine units trained specifically for boarding organic vessels used the chaos of battle to penetrate enemy hulls. They planted control devices in the bioships' nervous systems, turning the living vessels against their own creators. Within an hour of the battle's start, captured Vorthak ships were fighting alongside human vessels against their former allies. War Premier Keithvar realized with growing horror that his empire's greatest strength, their bioships, had become their greatest weakness. The humans had turned biological warfare into an art form. "All ships retreat to Death's Harvest," he ordered. "We'll make our stand around the flagship." But as his remaining ships fell back, Keithvar saw something that filled him with despair. The humans weren't just winning the battle, they were winning it with minimal losses. Their coordination and tactics had turned what should have been a costly victory into a one-sided massacre. Captain Young-ho Bae, commanding the carrier Mokpo's Fury, reported to Admiral Lee. "Sir, enemy fleet is down to approximately 3,000 active vessels. They're clustering around their flagship." Admiral Lee nodded grimly. The hardest part was still ahead. Death's Harvest was more than just a flagship. It was a weapons platform capable of destroying planets, and War Premier Keithvar had nothing left to lose. "All fleets prepare for final assault," Lee ordered. "Remember, we're not just fighting for victory, we're fighting for every free world in the galaxy." As the human armadas closed in on the massive enemy flagship, every person in both fleets knew that the next few hours would decide the fate of galactic civilization. Death's Harvest loomed before the human fleets like a mountain of living flesh and metal. The massive flagship was wounded but far from defeated. Its organic hull showed scars from the battle, but the bioship's regenerative abilities were already working to heal the damage. War Premier Keithvar stood on the bridge of his dying flagship, surrounded by the wreckage of his once mighty empire. Through the organic viewing ports, he could see the humans approaching from all sides. Their ships moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a single vast organism. "War Premier," his tactical officer reported, his voice hollow with defeat. "Our fleet is down to less than 2,000 ships. The humans have lost fewer than 300 vessels. Our biotechnology is completely compromised." Keithvar's clawed hands gripped the living controls of his ship. For 1,000 years, the Vorthak Empire had been unstoppable. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, enslaved dozens of species. Now, in a single day, they had been broken by a species that had barely learned to travel between stars. "Sir," the tactical officer continued, "the humans are demanding our surrender. They promise fair treatment according to something they call the rules of war." Keithvar laughed bitterly. Rules of war? The Vorthak knew only one rule: the strong consumed the weak. But these humans had proven themselves stronger in ways the War Premier had never imagined. "Open a channel," he ordered. On the bridge of Soul's Thunder, Admiral Lee received the incoming transmission. The face that appeared on his screen was reptilian, with scales covering most of the skull and intelligent eyes that burned with hatred and grudging respect. "Human Commander," Keithvar said, his voice like grinding stone. "I am War Premier Keithvar of the Vorthak Empire. You have fought well. Your tactics were unexpected." "War Premier," Admiral Lee replied formally. "I am Admiral Lee of the Human Defense Fleet. Your empire's war of conquest is over. Surrender now and your people will be treated with dignity." Keithvar stared at the human for a long moment. Such a small, fragile-looking creature. Yet he had accomplished what no other species in the galaxy had managed. "You offer mercy to those who have shown none," the War Premier said. "Why?" Admiral Lee's expression was serious but not unkind. Because that's what civilized beings do. Your people made choices that led to this war, but they're still people. They deserve a chance to make better choices. For a moment, Kethavar considered the offer. His remaining ships were outnumbered more than 10 to 1. His biotechnology had been completely countered by human tactics. Further fighting would accomplish nothing except more death. But then his eyes fell on the quantum weapon control panel beside his command station. Death's Harvest carried the most powerful weapon in the Vorthak arsenal, a device capable of collapsing local spacetime, creating a black hole that would consume everything in the system. If he was going to die, he would take these upstart humans with him, and the millions of alien civilians they had come to protect. Human, Kethavar said slowly, you have won this battle, but you will not live to enjoy your victory. His clawed hand slammed down on the quantum weapon controls. Alarms immediately began blaring on every human ship in the system. Dr. So-Young Kang, the fleet's chief quantum physicist, stared at her readings in horror. "Admiral," she shouted across the bridge, "the enemy flagship is charging a quantum collapse weapon. If it detonates, it will create a black hole. Everything in this system will be destroyed." Admiral Lee felt ice form in his stomach. Throughout the Crimson Nebula, there were nearly 15 million civilian refugees from the worlds the Vorthak had attacked. The humans had been protecting them while fighting the battle. Now they were all in danger. "How long until detonation?" he asked. 12 minutes, sir. Maybe less." "Can we stop?" Dr. Kang shook her head. "Not from here. Someone would have to get inside Death's Harvest and physically disrupt the quantum matrix. And even then..." She didn't need to finish. Everyone on the bridge understood. To stop the weapon, someone would have to fly directly into the most heavily defended ship in the Vorthak fleet and destroy it from within. It would be a suicide mission. Admiral Lee activated the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Lee. The enemy has activated a quantum weapon that will destroy everything in this system. We have 12 minutes to evacuate all civilian vessels to minimum safe distance." Throughout the human fleet, captains began calculating desperately. 15 million refugees in slower civilian ships. 12 minutes to reach safety. The math was simple and terrible. There wasn't enough time. "Sir," reported Commander Nam, "even if we use every ship to help with the evacuation, we can only get about half the civilians to safety in time." Admiral Lee closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his expression was calm and determined. "Then we don't evacuate," he said quietly. The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at their admiral in shock. "Sir?" Captain Choi's voice came through the communication system from her battlecruiser. "We stay," Lee explained. "We form a defensive barrier around the civilian evacuation routes. We use our ship's shields and hulls to absorb as much of the quantum collapse as possible. We buy them time to escape." Engineer Hyun-Woo Cho looked up from his station, his face pale. "Admiral, if we do that, every ship that stays behind will be destroyed. The quantum forces will tear us apart." "I know," Lee replied. He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Lee. I won't order anyone to stay. Any captain who wants to retreat with the civilian evacuation has my permission. This is purely voluntary." For 30 seconds, silence filled the communication channels. Then, one by one, responses began coming in. "Seoul's Thunder, this is Busan's Revenge," Captain Choi reporting. "We're staying." "This is Incheon's Pride. We're staying." Daegu's Wing reporting. "We're not going anywhere, Admiral." Gwangju's Hammer. "We're with you, sir." The responses kept coming, ship after ship, from massive battle cruisers to tiny converted cargo vessels, chose to stay and protect the evacuating civilians. In the end, nearly 20,000 human ships formed a defensive wall between the quantum weapon and the fleeing refugee fleets. But someone still had to stop the weapon itself. Captain Yejin Lee, no relation to the admiral despite sharing his family name, commanded the destroyer Olsen's Blade. Her ship was fast, maneuverable, and equipped with the latest stealth technology. "Admiral," she said over the communication channel, "I'm going in." "Captain Lee, that's a direct order. Stand down." With respect, sir, I'm not under your direct command. I'm a volunteer, remember? Captain Lee's voice was calm, almost cheerful. Besides, someone has to do it. My ship is the fastest we have. Admiral Lee wanted to argue, but he knew she was right, and there was no time. Understood, Captain. What do you need? Just clear me a path. The next 8 minutes were the most intense of the entire battle. 20,000 human ships concentrated their fire on Death's Harvest, tearing through its defensive systems to create a narrow corridor. Captain Lee's destroyer raced through the opening, dodging massive bioweapons and energy beams. This is Olsen's blade, Captain Lee reported as her ship penetrated the enemy flagship's outer hull. I'm inside, moving to the quantum weapon core. Her destroyer fought its way through the organic corridors of Death's Harvest like an antibody attacking a virus. Behind her, the opening in the flagship's defenses was closing as the bioship's systems regenerated. Admiral, Dr. Kang reported. Quantum weapon will detonate in 90 seconds. Captain Lee, status report. I'm at the weapon core, came the reply. Captain Lee's voice was steady despite the chaos around her. Setting charges now. Admiral, you need to know something. What is it, Captain? To completely disrupt the quantum matrix, I need to overload my ship's reactor while the charges detonate. The explosion needs to happen from inside the weapon core. Everyone on Admiral Lee's bridge understood what that meant. Captain Lee and her crew weren't just stopping the weapon, they were sacrificing themselves to save millions of others. Captain, Admiral Lee said quietly, is there no other way? No, sir. But Admiral, this is what we came here to do, to protect people who can't protect themselves. Tell my family I kept my promise. Tell the galaxy we kept our word. The communication channel went silent. 60 seconds later, Death's Harvest erupted in a brilliant flash of light. The quantum weapon, instead of creating a black hole, collapsed harmlessly as its core was destroyed from within. War Premier Keithavar died still trying to understand how these humans could sacrifice themselves for aliens they barely knew. The battle was over. The Vorthak Empire had surrendered, but the cost had been terrible. Of the 36,000 human ships that had entered the Crimson Nebula, nearly 12,000 had been destroyed in the final phase of the battle. Hundreds of thousands of human beings had died to save alien civilians they had never met. As Admiral Lee watched the last refugee ships reach safety, he received a message from Earth. It was from President In-Ho Moon, speaking for all of humanity, to the crews of the Human Defense Fleet. You have honored not just our species but the very concept of civilization itself. Your sacrifice will never be forgotten. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy would learn the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. But for now, Admiral Lee stood on his bridge and watched the stars, thinking of Captain Ye-Jin Lee and all the others who had given Ev 6 months after the Battle of the Crimson Nebula. Harmony's Edge Station buzzed with activity unlike anything in its long history. Representatives from every known species in the galaxy had gathered for what historians would later call the most important diplomatic meeting in galactic civilization. Ambassador Tae-Ho Kim walked through corridors that had been rebuilt and expanded to accommodate the massive gathering. The station now hosted not just the traditional Galactic Council members but also representatives from worlds that had been freed from Vorthak rule, delegates from species that had thought themselves extinct, and observers from distant star systems that had never before participated in galactic politics. The main assembly hall had been completely redesigned. Where once a few hundred delegates had sat in formal circles, now thousands of beings filled a vast amphitheater. The air hummed with dozens of translation devices working overtime to convert the babel of alien languages into something everyone could understand. Yuna Park walked beside Ambassador Kim, carrying a tablet filled with reports that would reshape how the galaxy governed itself. "Sir," she said quietly, "the final surrender documents from the Vorthak remnant fleet arrived this morning. Admiral Thekmore has agreed to all terms." Kim nodded. The surrender had been total and unconditional, but the humans had surprised everyone again with their treatment of the defeated enemy. Instead of executing war criminals or enslaving the Vorthak population, Humanity had insisted on rehabilitation and integration programs. Former Vorthak bioships had been converted into medical vessels and cargo haulers. Vorthak scientists worked alongside human researchers to understand and reverse the damage their empire had caused. "Any word from the reconstruction fleets?" Kim asked. "All proceeding ahead of schedule, sir. The Kalani homeworld's crystal cities are being rebuilt using a combination of their traditional techniques and human engineering. The Chirathi colonies have been liberated and are reporting full food production restored." As they entered the main hall, Kim saw a sight that still amazed him. In the center of the amphitheater, Admiral Dongwu Li sat beside High Counselor Vextar, whose skin now showed the bright blue colors of contentment instead of the red of distress. The Kalani leader had become one of humanity's strongest supporters, often speaking of the day when the young species taught the old galaxy what strength truly meant. President In-Ho Moon took the central speaking platform, his presence commanding attention from thousands of delegates. Behind him, a massive display showed the current state of galactic affairs, and it was a remarkable transformation. "Honored delegates," President Moon began, his voice carried to every corner of the vast hall by advanced speaker systems. 6 months ago, this galaxy faced its darkest hour. The Vorthak Empire seemed unstoppable. Entire civilizations faced extinction. Hope itself was dying. The hall was completely silent. Even the translation devices seemed to whisper. "Today we gather not as conquered peoples, but as free beings united in a common cause, the protection of all civilized life." Moon gestured to the display behind him. "The Vorthak Empire has surrendered completely. Their war criminals are being tried in courts that follow galactic law. Their victims are being compensated and healed. And most importantly, the galaxy has learned that aggression and conquest are not the path to strength." Delegate after delegate stood to speak. The Skyros ambassador, his feathers now bright with health instead of dull with fear, praised the human medical ships that had saved millions of his people. The Zentari representative, her leaves rustling with excitement, described how human agricultural techniques had ended food shortages on a dozen worlds. But it was the speech by former War Admiral Thekmor of the Vorthak that truly showed how much had changed. The reptilian officer had been one of Kethvar's most trusted commanders, responsible for the destruction of 3 star systems. Now he stood before the assembly, his scales showing the dim colors of remorse. "For 1,000 years, Thekmor said, his voice heavy with regret, my people believed that strength meant the ability to destroy others. We measured success by how many worlds we conquered, how many species we enslaved. We were wrong." He looked directly at President Moon and Admiral Li. "These humans showed us a different kind of strength. They came not to conquer, but to protect. They sacrificed themselves not for territory or resources, but for people they had never met. They won not through cruelty, but through wisdom." The former Vorthak officer paused, struggling with emotions his species rarely showed in public. "My people ask for the chance to learn this new way, to earn forgiveness through service instead of demanding respect through fear." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Delegates from dozens of species rose to their feet in applause. The sound echoed through the hall for several minutes. When the noise died down, Ambassador Kim took the speaking platform. The man who had once been dismissed as a representative of an unimportant young species now commanded the attention of the entire galaxy. 6 months ago, Kim said, you asked humanity for help. You expected a few ships and a token gesture of support. Instead, humanity sent everything we had. He activated controls that brought up images of the battle, the massive human fleets, the innovative tactics, the final desperate stand against the quantum weapon. But we didn't just send ships and weapons. We sent our values, our belief that civilized beings protect each other, our conviction that the strong have a duty to defend the weak, our hope that the galaxy could become something better than it was. The images changed to show the reconstruction efforts, human engineers working alongside alien architects to rebuild destroyed cities, human doctors treating patients from species they had never seen before. human teachers sharing knowledge freely with anyone who wanted to learn. The Terran Accord that we're signing today isn't just a military alliance, Kim continued. It's a promise that no world will face destruction alone, that no species will face extinction while others stand by, that the galaxy has protectors who will answer when help is needed. The Terran Accord was unlike any agreement in galactic history. Instead of the usual treaties between equal powers, it established humanity as the galaxy's protector species while giving all members equal voice in governance. Human fleets would patrol space routes and respond to emergencies. Human technology would be shared freely with all member species. Human diplomatic corps would mediate disputes before they became wars. In return, the galaxy would support human colonies, share their own knowledge and resources, and work together to build a civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest. The signing ceremony took hours as thousands of delegates added their approval to the historic document. But the most meaningful moment came when Vextar of the Kalani stepped forward to make the final speech. "When the darkness came to our worlds," she said, her skin glowing with colors that meant deep gratitude, "we called out in desperation. We had little hope that anyone would answer. But answer you did, humanity. You came not as saviors seeking worship, but as neighbors offering help." Her skin shifted to colors that showed wonder and amazement. "You showed us that a species' age doesn't determine its wisdom, that a civilization's power isn't measured by how much it can destroy, but by how much it's willing to sacrifice for others." She looked around the vast hall at the thousands of delegates from hundreds of species. "Today we don't just celebrate the end of the Vorthak threat. We celebrate the beginning of a new age. An age where the strong protect the weak, where knowledge is shared freely, where no one stands alone against the darkness." President Moon returned to the platform for the final words of the ceremony. "The galaxy asked for help," he said simply. "Humanity sent an armada. But more than that, we sent our promise, that as long as humans exist in this galaxy, no civilization will face extinction alone." As the ceremony ended and delegates began to leave, Admiral Lee remained in his seat, thinking about the cost of victory. 12,000 human ships destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of people who would never see home again. Captain Yejin Lee and countless others who had given everything for aliens they barely knew. But looking around the hall at species that were now free, at civilizations that were rebuilding, at former enemies working together for a better future, Lee knew the sacrifice had been worth it. Ambassador Kim approached him as the hall began to empty. "Admiral, there's one more thing. The deep space monitoring stations are reporting unusual energy signatures at the galaxy's edge. Unknown contacts, possibly another empire." Lee sighed. There would always be new threats, new challenges, new calls for help. "How many ships are they detecting?" he asked. "Difficult to say, possibly thousands." Admiral Lee stood up, straightening his uniform. Somewhere in human space, shipyards were already building new vessels to replace those lost in the Crimson Nebula. New crews were training. New technologies were being developed because that's what humans did. When someone asked for help, they sent what they could, and they always kept their word. "Alert all fleets," Lee ordered, "and send a message to the unknown contacts. Tell them this galaxy is under the protection of the Terran Accord.